Sounds good. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Katrina Kuzyszyn Jones, and I am happy to be here to talk about a kind of depressing subject. But I'm hoping that we can bring some hope to the situation and get some ideas for how to deal with how scary things can be as it relates to climate anxiety. I'm going to kind of ramble on through some slides. If anybody has questions as we go along, please feel free to chime in. I will also make sure that there's a little bit of time at the end if anybody has anything they want to add, etc. Okay? All right. So climate change, we know this is from Illinois because that's the graphic that I found, but this is happening everywhere, right? Climate change is changing our health. Since the 19th century, the average surface temperature of the earth has increased by about 2 degrees, excuse me. And it's increasing over the course of this 20th century. We know that this change is occurring because of global warming and that most of what's happening is because of our own human behavior. So it affects our well-being, it affects our planet, it affects our health, and it also affects our mental health. So what is climate anxiety? Really, it's getting, as you would expect, anxious about what's going on with the world. So you might experience a sense of dread about what is happening in the world and what's going to happen to the future of our planet. You might feel a sense of anger about what's happened or towards those that we feel like aren't quite doing enough or are doing things that are contributing to the problem, and a sense of helplessness for the future, what life is going to look like, not really knowing where we're going to start to fix things. And that can really lead to a feeling of overwhelm. And so while this isn't necessarily a category of mental health disorder, it's certainly something that we're seeing on the rise, and we have seen people experience it a lot more since 2020, when we've had people thinking more, having a little bit more time to think about how we are impacting our planet. So I'm going to take a little poll, and you can just put it in the chat. If I can figure out how to see the chat, that would be helpful. How do I do it? How do I do it?
If you can't see it, I can kind of let you know what pops in.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I'll see if I can figure it out. But if I can't, then we'll have you do that. So just kind of thinking about how many of you have experienced some level of climate anxiety, either you could put your little icon hand up, or you could put in the chat, yes or no.
Yes is very much, you see it?
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah. And how about those around you? Do you have other people in your life who are talking about this? Yeah, big time. Oh, especially clients. Yeah, interesting. Oh, and Jane says not enough. Oops, I went backwards. Sorry. Interesting. Yeah. So how often do you think about how your behavior impacts the environment? Or, right, how often is it kind of thoughtfully something that you're thinking about, or something that you feel like is kind of invading your thoughts / other people, whether it's people that you're working with as, clients, or your family or your friends, your neighbors, that type of thing? So a lot, all of the time, regularly, often, constantly mindful. I like that. Often thinking about it daily. Yeah. And it's hard to think about it every day when other people are not. Yeah. Feeling sad often. And then how has this worry or concern changed your behavior? Could you just pop in one thing that you've done that has been a change from how you behaved before, either for the better, right? Like you've changed some sort of behavior to aid the planet, or it's made you lose sleep or something like that, something that's changed your behavior. Mindful about travel, flying, maybe flying less, or at least thinking about it, driving a hybrid. Oh, I'm so on the fence about hybrid versus electric. Recycling obsessively, yes. How you shop, but having a negative mood. Thermostat control, combining car trips, working towards adaptation, planting a garden, change to bamboo products, trying to reduce waste, choices when buying things, limited plastic use. That's great. Mostly making changes in the direction of doing something that would have positive impact, and recognizing that perhaps it's also changing your behavior in the sense of feeling more sad, or whether it's changing your behavior and that you're thinking about it, or maybe it goes over into the worrying about it. So 4 in 10 respondents, and I can't even remember where I got this great infographic, sorry about that, have experienced eco-anxiety since the start of the COVID pandemic. Half of the people that responded experienced eco-anxiety, and 83% of those said that they felt it for the first time after March of 2020. So really having an impact after COVID hit. So what do we do about it? That's what I always come back to as a psychologist is, yes, might feel sad, angry, anxious. What do we do about it, right? So I like to think about this along the lines of acceptance and commitment therapy, right? What is it that you can identify as your value system and you can make a commitment to change through action? What can you not change that you need to work on accepting? My preference is, what can you do about it? Right. But thinking also that climate change is a systemic issue, and that while you may feel personally responsible for saving the world, no one person should have to bear that weight all by themselves, right? This is something that we all need to be working on together. So different ways to deal with the climate anxiety piece is what I'm going to start with. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about other things that we can do about it. So talking about it, right? That is definitely one thing that we can do, whether it's that we are talking in big groups about what's going on, talking with family and friends, but also talking with people that are on the same page, right? So just like with any kind of anxiety, any kind of concern that we have, we tend to do better when we can talk to like-minded people, or to people who we feel understand where we're coming from. And acknowledging that our emotions are valid, feeling fearful, feeling despair, feeling anger, these are all reasonable responses. That doesn't mean you want to get mired in it or stuck in it, but they're all reasonable ways to feel about the situation. and then take action, right? So avoid the doom scrolling, trying to balance out what do you see that people are doing that is helping rather than just focusing on, pictures of things floating in the ocean that shouldn't be there. Look at that because you need to be aware. It's good to have perspective and who's doing the cleanup, right? Read those stories as well and kind of balance that out. And then as soon as you can act, you feel less hopeless. You feel like you have more autonomy over the circumstances. And then we feel more hope for what we can do to actually get something done and make a change. Finding a community can be a really important part of this, right? So if you are living somewhere surrounded by people who are still like throwing their trash out their car window, it's probably going to increase your sense of anxiety or anger or despair. And so making sure that you find a group of people who are, on the same page with you and who are trying to help and make a change in the world in a positive way. And that this is a community who can feel sad with you, who can feel anxious with you, but who can also do something about it, right? So it's kind of an old-fashioned idea, but doing the trash on the road pickup and having a group of people who are going out and doing that, having a group that you are working with together, even if it's, just a group of friends, part of your family. It doesn't necessarily have to be a community organized action group, but finding people who want to help the way that you want to help. And many of us can feel like we have to be responsible, but the more, as individuals, but the more that we can work together, the more likely we are to actually get things done. You should certainly still do your own recycling because that's important. And you should not listen to, the idea that, well, it's only one person. What difference is it going to make? It all makes a difference, right? Changing your habits, making sure that you're recycling, doing the things that as an individual can help, and not listening to, kind of the voices of, well, it's only one bottle, right? And knowing that it's better for us on the whole, it's better for our mental health from a holistic standpoint to live according to our personal ethics and our value system. And things aren't going to change unless we adhere to our own individual ethics and values. So if you continue to buy items from places that don't care about the impact that they have on the environment, then things aren't going to change. If you buy from companies that do care, then perhaps things will be more likely to change, even if it's a slow drip, right? So strategies to take some individual action. These are probably things that you've heard before, but so often we just need to be reminded that there are things that we can do. So somebody talked about travel in there, right? Green up your travel. Are you in a position that you can take public transportation, take the bus, carpool, bike, walk? This isn't possible for everybody. So then you're in the position of having to balance out, I wish I could do this, but it just doesn't really work for where I live, or, I personally don't want to ride a bike when it's raining outside and have to bike to work, right? So then how do I balance that out with some other activity so that I don't have to, kind of get mired in my own anxiety or guilt around like driving a car, that type of thing. And I would say, do your best not to feel guilty, right? We have guilt for a reason. Guilt is there to teach us when we're actually doing something wrong. If you are, hope there's nobody here I'm going to insult, but if you are driving a big gas guzzler, then maybe it's time to think about changing your automobile, right? But beating yourself up and feeling guilty about whatever it is that your behavior has been doesn't usually move us towards change. It's that acceptance piece of this is something that I need to do, and then how do I move that value into action? So whether it's individually or in your community, right, helping yourself and others focus on things like planting and protecting trees, making sure that we have natural areas that are kept clean, talking to the right people about making sure that our water is kept clean, things like that. Looking for ways to cut your food waste, recycling. I'm going to talk a little bit more about these things. Conserving energy and speaking up are all things that we can do. So these are some of the things that you've probably already started to do and that you've thought about, but I think it's oftentimes a good way to deal with feeling anxious or angry, is to remind yourself of what you already are doing that is helping, and putting it all together, right? Sometimes having it in a very concrete manner in front of your face. These are the things that I do, right? So washing your clothes on the cold cycle, using the dishwasher over hand washing, catching rain water to water your plants, limiting your shower time. They might all seem small, but they all contribute, particularly if everybody here, right, were to do these things. I actually read something about trying to catch your shower water. So I tried it out. It was too soapy. I couldn't really do anything with it. I couldn't water my plants with it. But perhaps it's worth an experiment, right? And so if you can figure out a way to put something in the shower that captures the water without capturing the soap, one, I'd love to hear about how you did it. But also thinking about, you might see something and think, that's not going to work for me. Try it and see, use it to flush toilets, Jane. Thank you. I'm totally going to do it now. I'm going to go back and do it. That's excellent. Excellent. See, this is why you talk with people. So reducing your waste, right? Replacing as many items as you can with reusable ones. Use, reusable plates and cups rather than things that you would throw away. Using sustainable brands, buying travel utensils, trying to remember to ask the takeout place not to give you this disposable forks and spoons. I oftentimes forget to ask them. So I have this big old collection of plastic forks and spoons. I then try to do my best to donate that. So if I'm like donating food to the food shelter, then I'll put the forks and the spoons in there so that at least there's the hope that somebody will use them rather than that they will just get thrown away, right? And try to remember. And then being food smart, right? So buy what you need versus too much, trying to shop locally because that helps reduce carbon emissions. Try composting. This is something that is on my bucket list, and I have to figure out a way to do it because where I live, having a pile isn't necessarily going to work without bringing a whole bunch of critters into my house, which we already have problems with. But if you can have a pile, that's awesome, right? You can also try a composting company. You can get one of those little things. I think that's the direction I'm going to go. But there are lots of, again, ways to experiment and figure out what will work for you. Eating more plants than meat or choosing options like humanely raised and free range. And then this is one of the favorite things that I read is ignoring the expiration dates, right? Unless it looks bad, smells bad, they often put those dates on there and you can keep using it beyond that date. Be smart about it, right? Don't make yourself sick, but you don't just have to toss it. And of course, sometimes bigger action is necessary. So all of these small things do make a difference. And sometimes we just either for our own sense of well-being need to take bigger action, or this is something that is high on our value list. And so we want to make sure that we're working on this particular kind of project. Right. So work on a community project like building a solar powered garden in your area. Join a tree planting organization. These are just ideas, right? Writing to your representative, to your governor, to your town, not major, that's supposed to be mayor, I apologize. Like thinking about who it is that has influence that you can contact and explain to them that this isn't just important to you, but that this is important to your community. And these are ideas that you have. We want to plant a community garden or something like that. And then thinking about the conversations that you can have with people in your own community. Talk to businesses that you frequent, right? If you have a good, friendly relationship with your office neighbor and you noticed that they don't recycle, then it's, hey, can I give you a recycling bin? Or even, can I help collect things for you, depending on where your energy and your time is, right? But talking to places that you frequent as well, your favorite coffee shop, do they compost their coffee grinds? Maybe they don't, maybe they're not going to, maybe you collect them, but just thinking about different ways that you can make those kinds of contacts. And then focusing on corporate responsibility and accountability, right? Having companies realize, I don't know, I love my overnight quick shipping with Amazon. And one of the things that has made me become far more aware of all of this is in 2020, when everything was getting shipped to my house, right? All of the packaging, all of the emissions that go into that. It's something that I had to decide that I was going to change, right? And so I had to balance out not just convenience, but a little bit of fear around the pandemic and going somewhere versus having something shipped to my house. What was I going to be more concerned about, right? And climate justice is also a civil rights issue. I'm not spending a lot of time talking about this because I think this is kind of a bigger subject for another day, but I do think it's really important to remember that climate change exacerbates existing challenges that are faced by different communities and minority communities, right? So when you live in an area where there are leaks into your water system, you have exposure to various toxins, very often happens in a lower socioeconomic area. People can't get out. They don't feel like they have a voice. It's harder for them to make a change. And neighboring neighborhoods will oftentimes kind of push toxins into their areas, right? Being pushed out of your land in order to have somebody else take it over, whether it's to take it over for farming or for fossil fuels, thinking about how this displaces people and the burdens that it can place on others. And then living or working in a area where you generally are like, if you're, working in crops, if you are working in higher temperatures, this can affect your physical health. So maybe you're not exposed to particular toxin, but you're out. Like I was just in Washington. So I think about like the people who pick the apples in the heat kind of thing, right? So thinking about how all of this affects people in our communities and around us and what we can do about that. And again, kind of thinking about who you can contact about those things. So how can we fight back, right, against environmental racism is something to also be thinking about, can help you address your own anxiety / anger despair, right? Whatever it is that you're experiencing around what's going on in the world, being able to really be thoughtful about how you can take some action, right? So you may or may not be a going out into the picket line kind of person, but you can write letters, you can talk to people, you can go out in the picket line if that's the kind of action that you choose to take. But thinking about how to shut down, things that are contributing to problems in the environment, like coal plants and toxic facilities at your local level, right? Fighting for renewable energy and energy efficient standards at all of the levels, right? Supporting small businesses and unions to ensure that communities of color are accessing the revenue generation opportunities that they can get new energy into their own economy. Strengthening community resilience through your own sustainable behaviors and action planning, right? Like, again, kind of going back to that acceptance and commitment therapy concept of where are your values and what are you going to do about it? So environmental justice can also be particularly draining, right? So in order to take care of yourself, make sure that you're taking breaks, make sure that you're recharging so that you don't experience burnout. Because if you are doing this kind of action, we need you, and we need you to be focused on taking care of yourself as well as the planet, right? And if you're feeling hopeless, look at the brilliant work that's happening in the field. And you can also think about, on that individual basis, again, how do you adopt some sustainable practices that can lead to a sense of purpose and fulfillment that contributes to our overall level of happiness, right? Rather than dwelling on the overwhelming feeling of climate anxiety, taking that positive action to increase your sense of hope and positivity. And I actually did a presentation yesterday where one of the things I talked about was how we need to have a ratio of more positive to negative experiences, because our brains get caught on the negative. It's adaptive from an evolutionary perspective for us to be aware of the dangers that are around us, but it's not particularly good for us from a health perspective, right? So being able to recognize what is going on in the world, doing something about it, and balancing that out with your own positive action or your own positive thinking about it. And I don't mean that in a blowing sunshine up your backside kind of way, because that's not the kind of person that I am. And why do we give more focus to the negative than to the positive? So like I said, yes, it can be more adaptive, but in the end, being able to look at everything on the whole and really focus on, these are the things that I'm doing, the changes that I'm making, the action that's happening in my community, and trying to shift the focus towards those things or those activities, whatever is the right way to put it, rather than being overly focused on the negative aspects. So here's some things that are going on, at least in the triangle area, that if you are thinking about taking some, kind of a next step, that you can join on a city board or commission. There are community groups, right? Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Durham. Certainly, there are going to be things throughout the state. I think what can be important to think about is, if there isn't something that is in your particular area, can you join something somewhere else and then bring that thinking or that action into your own community? And there are some comments that are in there, and I'm going to get to those in just a second. Whoops, I'm going to keep going backwards. All right. And so we can also talk with our money, right? So if that is a way that you can contribute, then there are places that you can contribute and that you can donate your money. So money, time, all of these things really matter. If you can do a little bit of both, that's fantastic. That may or may not be something, right, that is an option for everybody. Thinking about, again, that guilty sense, right? You do what you can. There's no need to think that you should be doing something that you can't really do. And if it's something that you or someone else that you know can do, then let's do that, right?